Imagine running one of the biggest manufacturing plants in Europe. Orders are stacked for months. Your workers are ready. The machines are perfectly maintained. Everything is set for another record-breaking year. And yet, the factory is silent. Not because of a labor strike, not because demand collapsed, not because your product became obsolete. It's silent because turning the lights on now costs more than the steel you sell. This is happening across Germany, the country that built its reputation on precision, efficiency, and industrial dominance. In the heart of Europe, in cities that once glowed around the clock with molten metal and chemical reactors, machines are being powered down simply because electricity has become unaffordable. Executives aren't asking how to expand anymore. They're asking how long they can survive. And here's the part nobody expected. This collapse didn't come from war, pandemics, or foreign competition. It came from a decision Germany made all by itself, a decision that was supposed to save the planet. Over the last decade, Germany spent more than $500 billion chasing a green energy dream that was sold as the future of clean, cheap power. Politicians called it visionary. Activists called it heroic. But today, that dream is quietly bankrupting the most powerful industrial economy in Europe. Factories are closing, energy bills are exploding, and entire industries are now preparing their exit plans. And what caused all of it was one emotional decision that no one thought would ever come back to haunt them. Just a few years earlier, Germany actually had this figured out. Back in 2010, Chancellor Angela Merkel, a trained physicist, not some career slogan machine, publicly backed nuclear energy as the perfect bridge into a renewable future. Nuclear was clean, it was stable. It supplied nearly a quarter of Germany's electricity without pumping carbon into the air. The plan was simple: keep the reactors running while wind and solar slowly scaled up. Then a tsunami hit Japan. In March 2011, the Fukushima disaster dominated every screen on Earth. The images were terrifying: melting reactors, evacuated towns, a nuclear nightmare unfolding in real time. And even though Germany sits thousands of miles away in a region that doesn't exactly get tsunamis, panic spread instantly. Protests exploded. The anti-nuclear movement that had been simmering since the 1980s suddenly felt vindicated. Politicians stopped talking about safety audits and started talking about survival, not technical survival, political survival. So Merkel didn't consult engineers. She didn't run grid simulations. She didn't check whether wind and solar could replace a quarter of the country's electricity overnight. She pivoted. Within days, Germany announced the Atomausstieg, the total nuclear exit. 8 reactors were shut down immediately. No gradual transition, no backup systems in place. Just click, gone. 17 fully functional, already paid-off nuclear plants were sent to the scrapyard. Not because they failed, but because fear was louder than physics. It was the single most expensive emotional decision in modern European energy history. And that decision ripped a massive hole in Germany's power supply. A hole they were about to fill with something far more dangerous. But shutting nuclear created a gap Germany rushed to fill. With nuclear gone, Germany went all in on wind and solar. On paper, it looked like a triumph. Wind turbines blanketed the countryside. Solar panels covered rooftops. Billions in subsidies flooded the renewable sector. Politicians celebrated every new turbine as another victory for the planet. There was just one problem nobody wanted to talk about. The wind doesn't care about press conferences, and the sun doesn't show up on command. Northern Europe isn't California. Long winters, thick clouds, weeks where the air barely moves. And when the turbines stopped spinning and the panels went dark, Germany still needed electricity. Not for Netflix, but for steel furnaces, chemical reactors, and glass plants that can't simply pause for the weather. So when green power failed, Germany reached for the only thing it had left: coal. Not clean coal, not modern coal, lignite, the cheapest, filthiest, most carbon-heavy fuel on the continent. Entire villages were bulldozed to expand open-pit lignite mines, even as politicians gave speeches about saving the climate. Here's the part that never made the headlines. Despite spending hundreds of billions on renewables, Germany's carbon emissions barely budged for nearly a decade. Every time the wind died, those coal plants roared back to life. The country shut down zero-carbon nuclear and replaced it with the dirtiest fuel available. They didn't decarbonize. They just changed the color of the marketing. Germany was burning coal to prove how green it had become. And once nuclear was gone and coal became politically toxic, they turned to what looked like the perfect bridge fuel, a move that would chain their entire economy to one extremely dangerous supplier. And then Germany made itself dependent on one dangerous supplier. With nuclear gone and coal politically radioactive, Germany needed a new lifeline. Natural gas was supposed to be the hero of the story. It burns cleaner than coal. Power plants can ramp up fast. It's perfect for heating homes and fueling heavy industry. The only problem was that Germany didn't have much gas of its own. So it turned east. For years, Berlin followed a dangerously optimistic strategy called change through trade. The idea was simple. If Germany bought enough Russian energy, Moscow would become a friendly partner. After all, who would ever attack their best customer? This mindset produced Nord Stream 1 and the even bigger Nord Stream 2, giant pipelines running under the Baltic Sea, pumping Siberian gas straight into the heart of German industry. Cheap, reliable, endless. By 2021, 55% of Germany's natural gas came from Russia. More than half of the country's heating, electricity backup, and industrial fuel depended on a single foreign supplier. And there were warnings. Poland warned them. Ukraine warned them. The Baltic states begged them to stop. Even in 2018, a US president stood at the United Nations and openly said Germany was handing Russia a kill switch for its economy. The German delegation laughed. Fast forward to February 2022. Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine. Sanctions followed, gas flows slowed, then pipelines mysteriously stopped working altogether. The price of energy didn't rise, it detonated. Spot market gas prices spiked by nearly 10 times. A factory that used to pay $1 million a month for power suddenly faced $10 million. No business model survives that. The government scrambled. Utilities were days from collapse. Berlin had to pour tens of billions into emergency bailouts just to keep the grid alive. Factories began shutting down, not because they were inefficient, but because energy had become a luxury product. Germany had burned its nuclear bridge, demonized coal, and chained itself to Russian gas. And now that chain was snapping. That's when the real damage became visible. The impact didn't show up in headlines at first. It showed up in places nobody outside Germany ever visits. Take Ludwigshafen, home of BASF, the largest chemical company on Earth. This single complex consumes more natural gas than entire countries. For decades, it was the beating heart of European manufacturing, turning cheap energy into fertilizers, plastics, pharmaceuticals, and everything that makes modern life possible. Then, the numbers stopped working. In 2023, BASF announced it was permanently shrinking its German operations. Thousands of jobs cut, ammonia plants shut down, production lines frozen, and while Germany downsized, China got a gift. BASF poured over $10 billion into a brand new mega facility in Asia, where energy is cheap and politics don't lecture you for turning the lights on. They weren't alone. Miele began shifting production to Poland. Volkswagen openly discussed moving battery factories to North America to chase subsidies and escape Europe's energy prices. One by one, the companies that built the Made in Germany myth started packing their bags. Economists politely call this structural transformation. In reality, it's de-industrialization. Germany isn't Silicon Valley. It doesn't sell social media platforms. It sells things you can hold in your hands. Steel, chemicals, machines. When those industries leave, they don't come back. Europe isn't just losing factories. It's hollowing itself out from the inside. And as bad as that sounds, the situation got even more absurd. Because even the green electricity Germany was producing often couldn't physically reach the factories that needed it. But even Germany's green power couldn't reach the factories. Most people think Germany's problem is a lack of green energy. It isn't. Germany actually produces massive amounts of wind power, just not where it needs it. The turbines spin in the north along the North Sea coast. So the factories that keep the economy alive sit hundreds of miles south in Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg. To connect them, Germany needed giant high-voltage transmission highways. They were supposed to be finished by 2022. They aren't. Years of lawsuits, local protests, and not-in-my-backyard politics forced the government to bury cables underground, tripling the cost and pushing deadlines far into the future. Some lines may not be ready until the end of the decade. So what happens today when the wind really blows? The northern grid gets flooded with electricity it can't move south. To prevent blackouts, grid operators literally order wind farms to shut down. And here's the scam. They still get paid. The system is politely called redispatch. A better name is ghost electricity. Power that never existed but still shows up on your bill. German households are paying billions every year to compensate wind farms for not producing energy, while factories in the south burn coal and gas because the green power can't reach them. You pay once for the renewable energy you never received. Then you pay again for the dirty energy that had to replace it. It's like buying a plane ticket, being told the flight is canceled, and then getting billed for the bus you were forced to take instead. And just when people thought this couldn't get more surreal, Berlin rolled out a policy that nearly tore the government apart. And then came the policy that nearly toppled the government. By 2023, Berlin knew the story was falling apart. Nuclear was gone. Coal was back. Gas had turned into a geopolitical nightmare. So the government went looking for a win it could sell to voters. Not in factories, but in their basements. That's when they came after your heating system. A new law effectively banned new oil and gas boilers starting in 2024. The replacement was supposed to be heat pumps. Sleek, efficient, climate-friendly machines that work like air conditioners in reverse. The technology itself is brilliant. The problem was reality. Most German homes aren't modern glass boxes with floor heating. They're solid brick houses built in the 1950s with drafty walls and chunky radiators. A heat pump in those homes isn't a plug-and-play upgrade. It's a full renovation. Floors ripped up, radiators replaced, walls insulated. The bill? Anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000. Subsidies were promised, but the message people heard was simple. Take out a loan or freeze. Pensioners panicked. Middle-class families revolted. Tabloids called it the heat hammer. Approval ratings collapsed. The far right surged in the polls simply by promising one thing: we won't touch your boiler. The government scrambled to soften the law, delaying deadlines and carving out loopholes. But the damage was already done. Consumers rushed to buy brand new gas boilers before the ban took effect, locking in fossil fuel use for another 20 years. Meanwhile, the heat pump industry that had geared up for a boom watched sales fall off a cliff. Berlin tried to force a green revolution overnight and accidentally hardwired the old system even deeper. Officials still insisted everything was working. But the numbers told a very different story. Officials claim victory, but the numbers tell another story. On paper, Germany's leaders finally had something to celebrate. In 2023, national emissions fell to their lowest level in decades. Headlines declared the energy transition a success. Politicians smiled for cameras and told voters the pain was worth it. But look closer. The emissions didn't fall because green technology conquered fossil fuels. They fell because the factories stopped running. Steel production collapsed. Chemical output plunged. Energy-hungry industries cut shifts or shut entirely. When you kill the machines that power an economy, of course, carbon numbers go down. It's the equivalent of losing weight by cutting off your leg. The scale looks better, but the patient is bleeding out. And here's another uncomfortable truth. By shutting down nuclear, Germany made its electricity dirtier than its neighbor France. While France gets most of its power from zero-carbon reactors, Germany now relies heavily on coal and gas whenever renewables fail. So when a German driver proudly plugs in an electric car to save the planet, they're often charging it with electricity that produces several times more carbon than the power used just across the border. The country that branded itself as Europe's green champion is quietly running one of the dirtiest grids on the continent. The miracle wasn't green growth, it was green theater. So where does that leave Germany now? Now it's 2025 and the damage is no longer theoretical. Germany, once the unstoppable engine of Europe, is barely moving. While other major economies recovered, Germany became the only G7 nation to slide backward, stuck in a cycle of low growth, high energy costs, and vanishing industrial confidence. The old formula is broken. Cheap energy in, high quality exports out. That was the machine that made Germany rich. Today, that machine is coughing, sputtering, and slowly shutting down. Politically, the country is tearing itself apart. The parties that built their careers on the energy transition are now fighting for survival. Voters don't argue about climate targets anymore. They argue about whether they can afford to heat their homes or keep their jobs, and the rest of the world is watching. Developing nations in Asia and Africa aren't lining up to copy Germany. They're building coal plants. They're investing in nuclear. They're choosing reliability and affordability over ideology. Germany didn't become the global role model it hoped to be. It became the case study everyone else is using to decide what not to do. The world is learning from Germany's failure. Germany didn't lose $500 billion because of bad luck. It lost it because it tried to negotiate with reality. Engineers warned that wind and solar can't replace stable baseload power without massive storage. Economists warned that energy prices are the foundation of industrial power. Geopolitical analysts warned that depending on hostile suppliers was playing with fire. Those warnings were ignored. Instead of asking what was technically possible, Germany asked what was politically popular. Instead of respecting physics, it trusted slogans. And instead of building a bridge to the future, it smashed the one it was standing on. Today, the result is silent factories, fleeing industries, furious voters, and an economy paying $500 billion for a lesson it already knew. The lesson is brutally simple. You cannot run a modern civilization on wishful thinking. You cannot power an economy on weather alone. And when ideology takes the wheel, don't be surprised when it drives straight off a cliff. Germany just paid the tuition. The rest of the world would be wise to learn the lesson for free.